Alrighty, so this is going to be your video, your instruction video for the 5-part research assignment. So the overall picture is that for your final paper, you're going to have a research paper, a 7 to 12 page research paper due. So this can be over anything that you want it to. Um, if there is something that you're doing in another class that you're having to do a research paper for, maybe perhaps try to use the same kind of genre or theme topic and just manipulate it so that it's sociological or more specifically microsociology or social psychology. Um, and so you're just going to take a topic and then you will, manipulate it and research it in a way that kind of fits our parameters for this class. So I guess, whenever we start thinking about if you're not a sociologist and maybe you've only taken maybe an intro class or, you know, you're just taking this course just to kind of fulfill one of your upper level uh, things that you need. Sorry. Then let me just tell you. So I am a sociologist. I got my undergrad degree from Texas Tech University in sociology, communications, and English. And then I got my master's from Texas Tech, where I did my master's thesis over the widowed identity the identity transformation of widowed women from the silent generation. So this is people, probably your great grandmothers, people born between 1925 and 1945. They were born at a time where they were socialized into this kind of division of labor, where the men went out and were the breadwinners. They worked and dealt with the finances, hired the people that needed to be hired to do the plumbing or fix the vehicle, to buy the vehicle, all of those things, right? They kind of made those financial decisions for their family. And then the women stayed at home and were the homemakers, and they made the decisions for their children, raised them or reared them, cooked and cleaned and all of those fun things. So then whenever their husbands passed away, let's back up a minute. So once what we will learn in the coming weeks is that their role was dependent on their husband, right? These women, their role, and their identities were very much so intertwined with this person who they spent majority of their lives with. And so whenever that person passed away, they had to learn kind of all of these things that their husband took care of, right? How to hire somebody to fix the dishwasher, the plumbing, or how to buy a new air conditioner, where to take the car, right? They had to kind of learn how to do these things for the first time in their lives because of that really big division of labor. So I looked at that kind of identity transformation in that population. And then fast forward to now, where I'm getting my PhD here at UNLV, and I am what's called ABD, so it's all but dissertation. I have done everything to fulfill the criteria to be a doctor except for finishing that dissertation. And for that dissertation, I am looking at the how cultural discourses, this kind of macro way that we think about and talk about poverty and poor people in this country, and how that affects the delivery and reception of services at a nonprofit social service agency in the area. And so I say these two things because, they're quite different. However, in both of these, I look at identity and I look at how your socialization and these like larger macro cultural discourses and cultural ideals and values affect, that micro, the identities and whatnot. And then for your paper or for the instructions for your paper, I have an example of this tobacco kind of theme. So for my undergraduate research, I had to do, kind of like a senior thesis, kind of what it was called. And I was taking several different courses at that time, right? So I had a media, I had a communications degree, right? So I had a media and communications class. I had a history class, and then I had a medical sociology class. And so, of course, I needed to do large papers for each one of these. I think, there are 15 to 20 page papers for all three of those courses. And then sociology was my main um, degree. So I had to do a larger paper for that. And so, you know, nobody has time to do research, completely new research for every single one of those classes. So whenever I suggest to you to take, maybe a topic that you've already done, that you already know a little bit about, or if you have other classes that are, obviously like maybe a physics class, you wouldn't have too much rollover there, but something like psychology, communications, history, English, if you're doing a paper in any of those classes, then you can certainly, use the same topic for both courses. It's just about, where you, the direction within which you take that and what keywords you look for. So throughout this paper, you're going to see kind of this 5-part research assignment overview. You're going to see this theme of the tobacco stuff. And I tell you this because it is giving you an idea of how you can do that. So, for the history class, I looked at the history of tobacco, tobacco's influence on America throughout history, right? It was a sharecrop. It was one of the major sharecrops that kind of helped build this nation. And then we go into kind of like the early 20th century where people were smoking everywhere, right? In the doctor's office, on the train, out just in the homes, wherever, right? So nobody knew that it was bad for you, and people just did it everywhere. And then you start getting into kind of the mid 20th century, and you have you have the Surgeon General's warning that come up and show kind of the science behind, this whole entire kind of generation of people are starting to have COPD and influenza, other lung-related diseases, and they show the correlation between smoking and that, and so then you get into the 90s where there was a really big lawsuit against the major tobacco companies, and they had to pay for what you probably have seen, the Truth Campaign, right? It's some of those big media commercials that are really kind of striking and are like, oh, wow, and let's see, there was one where the lady has the stoma and she's talking about it and was like, if you want to smoke cigarettes, know that, you could end up like this. Or there's one where everybody's in the street in front of, the big tobacco building in a big major city, and then they all fall down, and it says this many people die a year from tobacco-related illnesses. And, it's kind of shocking and jarring to the viewer, like, wow, that's a lot of people, because it uses, every body counts as one towards that count. Right. And so that was the media part of it. So I did this history kind of going up. And then for that media class, media and communications class, I honed in on that Truth Campaign and discussed that and the influence that it had, and got some statistics to show how it's been going down. And in fact, Generation Z, or the I generation, which some of you may be kind of the elder ones from that generation, have lower instances of tobacco use than any other generation before. Right. That's really interesting. And then for the medical sociology class, I worked at a doctor's office at that time. And so I looked at how it affected our healthcare. I interviewed some of my physicians, because it was a cardiologist office, and tobacco has, some, really, bad effects on our arteries. It hardens them. And so, I did different papers for all of those classes, but it was on a singular topic. And so it kind of, made it a little bit easier. So that's a long way to say that something as benign as tobacco, right, could be used in all of these things. So something that you're doing another course, you might want to try to use for this one. So this assignment that you have, right? So the end goal is the research paper, the 7 to 12 page research paper, where you take a research question, a research topic that you have that you just want to know about. You want to think, because obviously if you don't have another paper for your class, you're just going to have to come up with one. So it's something that really interests you or sparks you have questions about. If you're an athlete, you might want to know, what are the effects of sponsorships on youth wanting to become an athlete, right? Seeing them on the ads or something. If you are a reader, right, you might want to see do something on the new genre of the young adult genre, right? That's a fairly new genre, and looking at how this was made, kind of what impact it has on the generation of people who are being targeted, right? You can do kind of anything. Just put it sociological, make it sociological, which we're gonna, through our steps, you're gonna kind of be tailoring it that way anyways. So I have this 5-part research assignment. So each one you have step 1, do module 1, step 2, module 2, step 3, module, so on and so forth. And then the final one is for your final paper, and that'll be in May, and that'll be due. And so the point of this assignment really is to teach you how to kind of better develop a research paper. I remember whenever I was an undergrad and they would tell me, oh, you have this 7, 10, 15, 20 page paper due at the end of the semester. They tell you that the first day and you kind of have a panic attack and then forget it, until the very end of the course because you're busy and you're doing work for, 3, 4 classes, you're working maybe, and you don't have time to think about it until it's basically due, and then you're really just putting it together very haphazardly, and you don't have a very good product, and you don't really learn a lot from it, right? It's kind of something that you're checking off to do to get your grade, and I don't want that for you. I want you to be able to make a good product. Some of you are going to be applying for grad school, or maybe even a job might need a writing sample, and so hopefully through these steps, for one, it makes it worth your while because you're getting graded for each one of these steps. Then for 2, they're building up upon each other, so it makes that final paper kind of effortlessly and easy. It's already, all of the foundation and scaffolding is there. Excuse me. And all you have to do is kind of fluff it up with a better intro and conclusion, and then make some transitions. And it'll take you less time for that final whenever you're worrying about and studying for all these other finals, and then you'll have just this really kind of polished paper that you can utilize in other avenues if you need to. And so I broke it down in these 5 steps, like I said. So step 1 is going to come up in a couple weeks. And for that one, you're just going to come up with a research question or research topic, right? You're going to identify a topic of interest that you wish to further explore. You're going to ask yourself kind of, what is it that I want to know about this? Why is it interesting? Why is it generalizable to like the other parts of population? How could society or me benefit from this research? Just kind of get yourself thinking about, hey, I like this topic. How can I make it sociological? And so, like I said, for example, I put if you're taking a medical sociology class, you may wonder in what ways have tobacco influenced society, right? And so that's really vague and broad. Well, there's many different questions or avenues that I could take that. Am I talking about healthcare? Am I talking about the economy? Am I talking about family, right? If you have a lot of people who are dying, like your grandparents and stuff, or you see them kind of having to be on oxygen, they have COPD, and emphysema was the word that I was trying to say earlier, that might really affect your family dynamics and the way that, your family responds to illness. And if you're a child growing up in that environment, right, what is it doing to you in your identity? And so there's lots of different avenues, and that's fine. Right now, you want it to be really, broad. You want it to have lots of different avenues of inquiry, but you do want to start thinking about kind of why is it important or sociologically relevant. And so having lots of quiz questions and avenues of inquiry, like I said, is really good. It can seem overwhelming, but through the next few steps, it's going to get less overwhelming, hopefully. And so what you're going to turn into me for that first one is a 1-page topic proposal. It needs to have that kind of main research question or topic. Like, I want to know, in what ways has tobacco influenced society? Or I just want to know kind of about tobacco, the sociological information on tobacco, right? Like what's been done, what kind of sociological studies has been done on tobacco, right? I might want to do kind of just a a literature review on it. And really, basically, this research paper is a literature review, because you're going to be finding literature to understand a question or topic that you have. And so you're not necessarily going to have to go out and interview people or, have any really methodology other than kind of finding these articles and synthesizing it. If you want to interview somebody, by all means, don't let me stop you. If you want to, take some statistical data, by all means, don't really stop you. However, this is more of a qualitative course, rather than a quantitative course. And you're really just trying to find an answer to a question that you have, in a more literature-based sense. But you know what? It might help you to interview somebody, might strengthen or help you understand what to research or how to answer kind of one of your questions. And so that'll be your first one. You're just turning that 1-page topic research proposal. And then that next module, you're going to write down 10 questions that you have regarding that topic, right? Like I said, you might have all these different questions, this vague topic. There's just all these different avenues that you could potentially research. So write down all of those, right? Try to make it 10. If you want to have more, that's fine, no less. But 10 questions is optimum and works for the steps better. And so you will just turn in those 10 questions that you have to me. And so both of those are worth 50 points. And then we'll get to step 3 and module 3, where you're going to take those 10 questions and you're going to synthesize them, right? You're going to break them down into 5 questions that you have. And so kind of depending on the position that you decide to take on your research paper, right, you might see that out of those 10 questions, you really want to know more about the advertising and media on tobacco, less about the healthcare industry, right? And so you're going to probably take out that healthcare industry questions, and then maybe you might want to keep some historical questions because you can use that as an introduction, right? Or there might be some papers that you can find that kind of describe how we got to this point, and that might help you understand, of course, why we needed the Truth Campaign, why we needed those advertisements that discourage people from using tobacco. And of course, we all can think back to maybe those advertisements in the in the early to mid 20th century that was like, made it cool, made it look sexy to smoke cigarettes, and then of course to have that kind of antithetical advertisement campaign that we see now that says it's not cool and it kills you and it's bad, right? You might need to have those kind of questions. So you're like I said, you're gonna massage those questions the 10 questions that you had. You're gonna either take out ones that are just too broad, you could do a whole paper on, or it doesn't really match what else you're gonna do. It would be kind of out there and it wouldn't really build up to what you're trying to do. And then you'll combine some that you're like, both of these questions are very similar. Like on my examples, my number 1 question is, what influence did tobacco have on U.S. society? And then number 2 is, what influence does tobacco have on society, right? I can combine those into one question, because probably, some of the papers that I'm going to find are going to do, more general, what influence did tobacco, the influence that tobacco has on U.S. society, and it might look at did and does in that same paper. So I can make that one question. So then but basically just synthesize it to 5 questions that combine those. One question might be, you might need to leave one question just on its own. You'll take out some that you don't need, combine the ones that you do, right, and make them into 5 questions. And that you'll submit me those newly formed questions to me, and then I would like to see a paragraph underneath each number kind of explaining, why you linked each one together, why you eliminated some, and why some of them are more important than the other. You'll just explain kind of your thought process behind those questions. And then, so you'll have 5 questions then, and then those are going to be your starting point, your jumping off point to go find the literature, the research, right? You're going to go find the research for this research paper, or you're going to go do the research for this research paper. Step 4 is going to be probably your most important step of this, even more than maybe your final paper, because it is going to be the meat of your final paper. It's going to be what makes that final easy, effortless, and really polished. You could think of it as a rough draft, really. So you're going to have two sources, two scholarly peer-reviewed sources, journal articles for each of those 5 questions, okay? And you're going to use those two, at least 2. You can have more, of course, for each question, but you must have 2 for each, or 10 total. So if you just have one for one and you have 3 or 4 for another, then that's okay, because like I said, one of your questions might be really, really important, or the most important to what you're trying to do. And so you can break it up in that way. However, to me, it's just easier to say, I need 2 here, 2 here, 2 here. And then, but you have to have 10. And they have to be scholarly, peer-reviewed journal articles, okay? Some scholarly books are okay as well. However, most people don't have time to read entire books in the semester like that for a paper like this. If you need to, you can go use like statistical evidence, but it has to be somewhere from like Pew Research Center. I have a list. Stanford School of Business has a list of other, appropriate statistical websites that you can use. So like the U.S. Census, Gallup, Pew, like I said, are all okay. This is a qualitative paper because it is, more of a qualitative class and more theoretically heavy. I doubt that you're going to need much of that, but you might want to start out your paper kind of with some statistics of saying, like establishing why this topic is really important, right? If I was writing that medical sociology class, I might cite, X amount of people die each year from tobacco use, right? And I'm going to need a citation there because I can't just say that number or else it doesn't mean anything. It's opinion. You have to be able to, quote, if you're saying anything like that, you have to be able to source it or cite it, and then, so that's a big component too. So the step 4 is going to be really graded mostly on that you have 10 sources, that they are appropriate sources. And because, it's really important for you to be able to find and locate good sources. In this day and age of fake news, it's a essential skill really to be able to find, synthesize and understand and critically evaluate the information that you're getting. So blogs, news articles, even really, all of those are not good and don't use them, right? Like, so if you copy and paste a URL at all, it'll be no points. If you use any sort of website that isn't like from a journal article or one of those statistical websites, official ones, like I said, then it'll be a 0 for those points. I won't count it at all. And if you don't understand or you don't know where to find these sources, you need to email me or come by my office, go see a librarian, right? They're there to help you. Stick to Google Scholar, right? So not Google Scholar, the library website, or go into the library itself. You can log into like JSTOR, EBSCO. Those are all going to help you be able to find the appropriate sources. I'll also list some of the main journals too, where you can kind of make sure that you're in some of those. Communications journals, English to a degree, history to a degree, law reviews, all of those can be sociological as well, but they have to be from a peer-reviewed journal, because the peer-reviewed process ensures that the science was done correctly, that the other experts in the field concur with it and say, yes, this is valid and reliable sources, right? So you will go find those 2 sources for each of those questions and then answer the question, right? So you can either turn into me one or 2 ways. And I highly recommend the first way, okay? So this can be turned into me as a rough draft. So you can answer those questions, and you will need, with those two sources, the answer to that question will at least be a page. Okay. So the minimum for what you turn in here is 5 pages, not including your bibliography or works cited page, of course. Because if you have 5 questions, right, and then you find 2 sources to answer that question, and you're explaining, you're doing transitions, setting up what you're answering, giving quotes, transitioning to the next part, giving quotes, and making an argument for yourself, that's going to at least be 1 page, if not 2 or 3, depending on how important that question is to your argument or your paper. And so right there, you have 5 questions. If you answer all of them thoroughly, you have 5 pages, and then you have your works cited. Of course, make sure that you are citing your sources in the text, right? If you put a quote, it has to have proper citation. So author, date, page number, right? All of those, depending on it. The reason I hesitated there is because it depends on what you're using. You can use APA, MLA, Chicago, ASA, whatever you use in the discipline that you are, or whatever you're most familiar with. You're more than welcome to use. Just make sure that you stick with it throughout. And then make sure that you're doing it correctly, right? Because I will check. If you don't cite correctly, it could be considered plagiarism, and that's kind of bad, right? It's really bad. Don't plagiarize. Make sure that you cite correctly. And then you also have to have the full citations at the end under a works cited or a bibliography. So the second option that you have to turn into me is to just have each of those questions on like the beginning of the page and then answer it like that, right? So you can go ahead and have like a soft, for the rough draft part, a soft intro that you're not really fleshed out yet, and then answer those in the 5 pages, and then like a conclusion that you're kind of going to work on and polish. If you do it that way, I'm going to give you comments back. I'm going to give you suggestions. It'll be that you can use to really make that final paper polished and well done. If you want to turn it the second way, where you have just the questions on the top of each page and then your answer, that's fine too. I'll try to give you as much comments as I can regarding that information that you provided, but it'll be hard for me to give you, really good, on this intro, I would add this, on this conclusion, make sure that you're doing this, transition here to here isn't really well, make sure you flesh that out, like those kind of comments. But whichever one is easier for you, you may do that. It seems to me that the best products come out of the rough draft. And like I said, so then you'll have at least 5 pages, if not more. I'll give you comments to be able to take into consideration whenever you finish that draft. And then for step 5, for your final, you're going to finish that final paper. And from step 4, you already have at least 5 pages, and your minimum is 7 pages. So you just need to make sure that intro is really buffed out, that conclusion is really drawn together well, right? You succinctly reiterate what you said throughout, like what your research question, what your findings were, right? What the answers were to it, what your point was, and then it's there. Make sure that you have good transitions and flow throughout your paper. I mean, and then you already have you don't have as much work to do, and it's already there. You have the scaffolding, you have the foundation, and it shouldn't take you but a day or two to kind of really massage it into something really, really great. And so for that final paper, you'll turn into me a 7 to 12 page paper. You're going to need to demonstrate to me, that you have proficiency in the materials. You got to use concepts and ideas that we have learned. Most of those concepts and ideas are already going to be in the research that you're doing, because if you're using sociological peer-reviewed journals, then they are already under the foundation of these things that we're learning, right? And so it'll already be inherent, but I want to be able to see that you understand what you're using and why it's appropriate, right? You don't have to be explicitly say it, but it needs to be implicit in what in your writing, right? And in your conclusions and what's going on there. So just be mindful of that sociology in your paper, because while any of these topics can kind of be sociological. You have to make sure that it is. If I turned in that history paper that I did on the history of tobacco to my sociology professor, she'd be like, okay, so what? What does that have to do with sociology? And I could turn in that paper, but I would need to massage it to demonstrate that sociology, right? To say that, so what? Say all this history, and then, so what does that mean for sociology? Well, it means that that as a country, we have idealized tobacco use because it was a sharecrop and made us really a strong nation. And then it was kind of cool and sexy in an era where we look back and we kind of, especially the Roaring 20s, right? We kind of idolize that era as fun and cool. And so future generations, even though they knew that that there was health implications to tobacco use, they still used it because of that larger cultural ideal of sociology and portrayal of tobacco use, right? So it's just a so what and massaging it and putting forth that sociology. So just to reiterate, you're going to have these 5 parts that are going to be for grades, but all of them are going to be building up to that final to make it easy, effortless, and hopefully in your other classes, right? Especially if you're a senior, I'm sorry, I wish you could have learned this sooner, but if you're a sophomore or a junior, you'll be able to take this to the rest of your university career and do a modified, easier, faster version in your own courses, right? So now, since I've developed this 5-step, and I had a version of it given to me by a sociology professor who I did an independent study course with as an undergrad, and I was like, oh my God, and it was my senior year, right? And I was like, oh my God, this is like, how come I didn't know about this before? If I would have known about this previously, all of these papers would have been so much more easy. So I've taken it and kind of made it so that it would be easier for a course. But I still utilize these steps in my graduate studies too. So might do it, not throughout the semester. But of course, the step 1 I start thinking about what is it, and then in the following weeks, kind of what are the questions that I have about it. Okay, now I want these questions to be condensed. What do I really, really want to know about it? Or I start doing the literature review and see that there's a lot more literature to explain these questions, right? And so for me, if there's a gap, if there's something that's not research, is what I want to research because that's what I'm doing for a living. But for you, you would probably want the stuff that's been researched more because you're essentially doing a literature review to answer your question. And then, I start answering those questions by finding that, and then just on my own. And then my final paper is kind of, I already have all the stuff there. I already have all the papers, the research that I need. And then I can just, write it up whenever I sit down. And I don't have to be like, Googling and looking through the library website and also writing at the same time and trying to multitask, which I don't know about you, but whenever you got a lot on your plate and you're trying to take care of a kid and take care of classes and do work stuff, it gets a little bit hard to multitask in that way. So if you have any questions, email me, come to my office. Hopefully this assignment helps. Hopefully this video helps. I will also have each of these assignment kind of details on the weeks that they're due. I think for a few of them, I have a video explaining just individually to kind of refresh you. This video is more to give you the overview and the why and give you some ideas to think about. And then, of course, whenever it comes to something that you're actually having, when the time that you're actually having to submit it, we'll give you a refresher and just on that component of it, that part of it, so that you make sure that you're turning in exactly what you're supposed to be turning in at that time. Alrighty, well, hopefully that was helpful. I'll talk to you soon.